I hope this finds you doing well, and thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to look at 2 Samuel chapter number 9, but I want to start off with a reminder of David's love and loyalty with Jonathan, the son of Saul. They made a covenant together in 1 Samuel 20, and Jonathan says, if I'm still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever. Verse 17, and Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. So Jonathan and David, though they were not of the same family, they loved each other like a brother. They had a bond and they made a covenant. And the covenant included the fact that when Saul was no longer king and Jonathan was, either dead in battle or had been not king, that David would take care of his family. Usually in the culture, once a new king came in, he would destroy all the remnant of the previous king because he didn't want competition. But in chapter number 9, and David is at the height of his power. He's been defeating enemies, and wherever he goes, the Lord goes with him. And David said, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? So now that he's in the place of power, sitting on the throne as king of Israel, he remembers his commitment to Jonathan. He says, is there anyone else left? And then it goes on, it says, now there was a servant of the house of Saul, whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? And he said, I am your servant. And the king said, is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him? And Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. The king said to him, where is he? And Ziba said to the king, he's in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar. Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his feet and paid homage. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, behold, I am your servant. And David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. Now, think about this, is that normally a person who was crippled wouldn't be allowed in the presence of the king. And here's Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, who became crippled when they heard the news of the death of Saul and Jonathan. The maid had picked him up and ran and fell, and his feet were crippled ever since that time. And now he's being invited into the presence of King David, and he must have been somewhat fearful, for normally the remnant of the previous king would be destroyed or killed. And he says, here I am. And he falls on his face and he says, and pays homage. And David says, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land, and you shall eat at my table always. So he was being brought from the place of a previous king and now nothing, to the place of being on the equivalent of being one of the sons of the king, where he would eat before the king every day. And it says down in verse 11 and 12, he says, so Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons, And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now, it's just an interesting story because it shows that David took the covenant with Jonathan seriously. But it also shows us the relationship that God brings us into. We come to God, in a sense, crippled, broken, in great need, guilty, abandoned, whatever you want to say, whatever words seem to fit for you. But that's how we come to God. We don't come to God as good people who are getting better. We come guilty, and he redeems us. And because of God's covenant with us through the Son, Jesus, he gives us a seat at the table of the King where we can dine at the King's table daily, every day. And so I wanted to encourage you today to remember that it's not your past, none of your past failures or your successes has anything to do with where you stand. It's your faith in Jesus Christ, the King, who rules and reigns, and he invites you into relationship with him, and he gives you a place at the King's table. Don't miss out on it. Daily, you get to walk in an intimate relationship with the Lord Jesus, so that as you sit before him, you can, in quiet meditation, seek to hear his voice, so that you can have a heart to obey, so that you can commune your needs, that you can communicate everything that you desire, because you're approaching not just anybody, but the King, and you have a seat at the table. It's why Hebrews reminds us to come boldly before the throne of grace, because it's all grace. It was grace for David to reach out to Mephibosheth, and it was grace that caused the Father to send his Son, who is grace, to proclaim liberation, deliverance, to give us a seat at the table of the King. That's your great privilege, friend, and I hope that you will enjoy it, knowing that the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is also your Papa, and he's made a place for you at his table. Despite us coming in guilty and lame in our feet, he says, I've redeemed you. I've made you as one of my own sons. I have given you adoption. That's your great privilege. And I hope that you'll live each day that way and enjoy it. God bless.